Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 4th, 2021, the Chair recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Perry, for 30 minutes.
I thank the Chair for the opportunity and the time, joined by my friends here this evening to talk about the impending decision of the Supreme Court and, of course, the things surrounding it, including the unfortunate, unprecedented leak of the information from the Court, as well as the, I think, heretofore unprecedented protesting at the homes of the justices, which can only really legitimately be described as an attempt to influence and change their decision. And we're going to get into all that, but at this moment I want to recognize my good friend, the kind gentleman, Mr. Dan Bishop, for some comments on this subject.
I thank the gentleman from Pennsylvania, and he's right. You can't help but notice and perhaps be distracted in an unseemly way by the stream of insidious attacks on the institution of the United States Supreme Court that began with ideas about packing the court, the well-known threat by the majority leader in the Senate that you won't know what hit you, to the justices of the Supreme Court, followed by that unprecedented leak, unprecedented in the history of the United States Supreme Court for a draft opinion to leak to the public. But we weren't done then, because in the ensuing 2 weeks, the leak of the online publishing of information about the residences of the justices of the Supreme Court and the appearance of mobs outside their houses to intimidate them. And we're not done then. Last night in the Judiciary Committee of the House of Representatives, the most unseemly attacks on the institution of the court. And we can look forward, and we're still not done, because because that committee, the Democratic majority of that committee, has scheduled for next week a hearing on the Dobbs case as it pens for decision on the calendar of the court. Another unprecedented trampling of institutional norms by a majority who reminds us constantly of their desire to protect democracy. But as I say, all of that threatens to cover over what should be a hopeful moment for this nation, in which we may, for the first time in 49 years, set aside a regime that has resulted in the loss of 61 million innocents. We may soon see in this nation that no longer will tiny babies, at the instant of their formation and their first weeks of growth, when their formative heart begins to beat and they can sense pain, be forcibly ripped limb from limb as they're extracted from their mother's womb by an abortionist. We can aspire now, given the hope that emerges from what was intended for evil but God may use for good. This opinion that says no longer will the deficient logic and willful action of a Supreme Court majority in 1973 dictate the course of this nation and commit us to a continuing abomination against the most innocent. The aspiration that it may come to pass that the abomination of Roe v. Wade will join Dred Scott and Plessy versus Ferguson and Korematsu on the ash heap of history. a stain upon the history of the United States, to be sure. But one that the nation and those who have the good fortune to live within her confines may yet live to see redeemed. Aspiration, hope, faith that this nation may yet indeed see the living out of its creed. That's what I aspire to tonight. And I thank the gentleman, and I yield back.
I thank the gentleman, and those are indeed inspiring and hopeful words as we stand ready to hear the court's final decision, not trying to leak it, not trying to persuade it unduly, doing the work of democracy, of a representative republic, speaking on behalf of the people that we represent, our bosses, so that they can decide, not just a few folks across the street here in robes making decisions for the whole country. With that, I'd like to recognize the kind gentleman, the good gentleman, Mr. Ralph Norman.
Thank you, Congressman Perry. Thank you for getting this colloquy together. You know, Dan Bishop put it well. America is getting a front row seat to a left unhinged group that on an opinion that was leaked that is illegal on its face can inspire people before the decision is even rendered to go to the homes of the Supreme Court justices and attempt to change their minds. It is illegal. It's in federal statute. It's punishable by a year in prison. Merrick Garland, we call on him to enforce the law, to start arresting people. When is it going to end, folks? When is it going to end when a decision that the left doesn't like, in anticipation, is going to the houses of the Supreme Court justices and all the neighbors and disrupting a complete neighborhood and disrupting the lives of justices who are not political figures? They're elected for life. When will we see fences stop being putting up around the Supreme Court? Who would imagine? The founders would have never guessed that this would have been come into effect. You know what's so appalling? The comments from this administration and from its supporters, quote by one person who is on the abortionist side, if abortions aren't safe, then you aren't either. Another quote, the time for civility is over, man. Being polite doesn't get you anywhere. This is just a replay of the vandalism that took place all across this country. Over 537 cities torn up, and a decision has not even been rendered. Folks, it's time for a change. It's time for this to stop. It's time for all Americans to voice their opinion and displeasure over this. The killing of a child. When you follow the money, that's where you know where the priorities are. For Title X funding, in the 23 budget, this administration is putting forth $400 million. $400 million, $113 million increase to fund abortions that goes to Planned Parenthood. In the United Nations Population Fund, going to countries overseas, over 56 million of the taxpayers' dollars are going overseas when we can't get baby formula. We can't get supplies that Americans need. The inability of a parent to tell a child that's crying in the middle of the night, I can't get your formula, falls directly on this administration. So, General Perry, I want to commend you for doing this. This voice has got to get louder, and Americans are simply tired of it. And to do this at this time in history has got to be stopped, and I think it is. Thank you for doing this.
While I'm being joined by some of my other colleagues here, you know, Congressman Norman mentioned the baby formula. We're here to talk about the stain of abortion on our country, but, you know, we're watching what's happening. We're talking about children that need their formula. The mothers need to feed their babies. They can't get it at the store, but yet we see the shelves are full down on the southern border, full of baby formula. What about America's babies, ladies and gentlemen? What about America's babies? Look, you don't have to take our word for it. We're here to talk about the stain of all the lost lives of the innocent over these 49 years. But don't take our word for it. Don't take Republicans' word for it. How about Democrats? How about Governor Bob Casey in the Abortion Control Act of 1982, where he had to go to the Supreme Court and fight against Planned Parenthood for things like parental consent prior to a minor undergoing an abortion? What a novel concept. Oh, so striking. How about yesterday, the Washington Post, not known as a bastion of conservatism, saying that, yes, experts say protests at SCOTUS justice homes appear to be illegal. Because Title 18, Section 1507 of the U.S. Code says it is. Cannot try and influence the decision of the court. But the left doesn't care. Every single day when you wake up, you say to yourself, I don't know how it could get much worse. I can't believe what's happening, and I don't know what else could get worse than it is, but then every single day something else unprecedented happens. And yet today, that is occurring yet again. And if you don't believe me or the Washington Post or Bob Casey, Governor Bob Casey versus Planned Parenthood, by the way, I'm not sure how Governor Casey would feel about his son's actions in the U.S. Senate when they voted for the most extreme position, which would make abortion legal at any point during the pregnancy, including up until the minute of birth. Voted for that. His father fought the good fight. But what about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, celebrated leftist on the court, celebrated believer in abortion and protector of abortion, who said that the law, the 1973 law, did too much too fast. Said that doctrinal limbs too swiftly shaped may prove unstable. She knew. She knew this was a stain on our humanity. She knew. With that, the great gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Jody Hice.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We are grateful to have you chairing the Freedom Caucus. We're grateful for your leadership and for having this special order tonight. Yeah, I want to take a moment in my opening remarks to say thank you to those Supreme Court justices who right now are experiencing tremendous and unjust treatment and intimidation from a radical left mob that's absolutely out of control. And many of us have been in the battle for life for decades, and we are grateful finally that this horrendous stain on America's history is potentially coming to an end, and those who have stood for our Constitution, Supreme Court Justices Alito, Coney Barrett, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Thomas, we all take a moment to say a huge thank you to them for standing up for the Constitution, for standing up for the unborn and doing the right thing. And we want them to know that we and millions of others Americans are standing with them in deep gratitude this evening. Never should anyone in this country, but at this point, our Supreme Court justices, never, ever, ever should they be afraid of the leftist mob, because they are doing their job as Supreme Court justices to stand for the Constitution and to correct unconstitutional law, in this case, as it comes their way. And yet now they are facing great intimidation by the radical left agenda. And we, millions of Americans, are absolutely disgusted by what we are watching on television as a result of what has already been described tonight, an unprecedented and, I believe, to be probably an intentional leak of Justice Alito's decision, a majority decision in this case of Dobbs v. Jackson. And how in the world does that leak happen? We hopefully will get to that, the bottom of that, with some investigations in the future. But the behavior now of the left is unacceptable. It is illegal. It needs to be dealt with. There needs to be accountability. This is absolutely bringing out the worst of the radical left in this country, and I hope every American sees it. I hope they see it for what it is. Here's the Supreme Court justices doing their job. We have three branches, equal branches, separate branches. And this branch, the judicial branch, and in this case the Supreme Court, doing their job and facing the wrath of radical leftists simply because they don't like the decision. Look, we have fallen so far as a country, how far we've come to the point that now we're willing to end innocent life and rip little baby boys or girls from their mother's womb. I mean, here we have 5 weeks. The child has a heartbeat. 10 weeks, arms, legs, fingers, toes. 15 weeks, a fully developed heart and capable of feeling pain. It is a child in the womb. It's absolutely amazing. Enough is enough. It's time that we hold these people accountable. It's time that we come behind our Supreme Court justices. Whether anyone agrees with the decision or not, they are doing their job. We obviously agree with the decision, but they're doing their job and they need to be protected. We cannot allow the highest court of our land and our Constitution to be put in jeopardy as it is now. And again, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for leading this time, this special order, giving each of us an opportunity to stand for our Constitution, to stand for our Supreme Court, and to stand for life. With that, I yield back. Thank you.
I thank the good gentleman from Georgia, and he's reminded me, as I said, you don't have to believe us Republicans. You reminded me that President Biden said this is a child. What we've known all our lives, right? But even don't believe us if you don't want to. Believe your president. He said it's a child. So we know, right? Absolutely. And we are so grateful. We have, as people that love life, love the protection of life guaranteed in the Constitution, we have suffered and prayed for 49 years. We didn't like the decision 49 years ago in 1973. We didn't like it, but we didn't do the wrong thing. We used the system appropriately as it was designed by the founders and the framers of our great country to remove the stain of the loss of innocent life from our laws. And we are on the edge of that. But the point is that there's a right way to do things. Even though we disagree on occasion, we are a country of laws. And if it's going to be okay to break the law just because you disagree with the decision, well, that's not a country that's going to endure very long. With that, I'd like to now recognize the kind, great gentleman, Matt Rosendale from the great state of Montana.
Thank you so much to our tremendous chairman of the Freedom Caucus, the tip of the spear for this body, the conscience of the conservative movement here in Washington, D.C. And I'm proud to stand here with you to be a voice for life today. It is painfully ironic to me as I look back that in 1973, the same year that the Endangered Species Act was passed to protect endangered plants and animals, our Supreme Court made that terrible, flawed decision in Roe v. Wade, allowing abortions to take place. Now, I don't know how many wolves or how many bears have been saved since 1973, but I can tell you that 63,000 children have been killed. 63 million children have been killed since that day. Roe v. Wade created abortions on the basis of a supposed right to privacy under the 14th Amendment, but they forget about the guarantees in our Constitution to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The very first promise that we have from our Creator is life. The Dobbs decision would suspend the federal protection of abortions and finally return this question back to the states. So when we leave here, after this decision is finally released and we all are very optimistic that it's going to overturn Roe v. Wade. Let us not rest, folks. Let us not rest. We are still going to have to go back to our respective state legislatures and give them the support and give them the guidance that they're going to need to make sure that they protect the lives of the unborn. Let's be very clear about this. Democrats, not Republicans, are the ones who are out of step with the American public. The rest of the world, they are out of step with them. Today, they continue to push for taxpayer-funded death on demand. Let's call it what it is. We are no longer talking about yanking an unborn child from a mother's womb. The Democrats are so out of step, they are literally having discussions about whether they will kill a child once it is outside of its mother. This is taxpayer-funded death on demand is what they are trying to push forward. And I am so proud that all of the members are standing here to fight against that today. Roe v. Wade was outdated and was made before scientific advances helped us understand the clear humanity of the unborn child. An unborn life is a separate, unique individual with its own DNA. Let's follow the science. That's what they always say, General. Let's follow the science. Our friends to the left, well, let's follow the science. That child has a separate and unique DNA. It is a new person. Let's protect it. I've always been a staunch supporter and defender of the most vulnerable, especially the children. My wife and I have participated in pro-life marches across the state of Montana in many, many different cities and municipalities. And I will tell you that this is the first year that we were able to join many people here in Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, and the encouragement and the enthusiasm amongst the tens of thousands of people to protect life was overwhelming, I will tell you. I can remember, I have 3 children, I have 3 sons, and I can remember the first time that I held my children, each and every one of them, and I looked at their faces to see if they matched mine, to see if they had that little dimple in their chin. I looked to see if they had all 10 of their fingers and 10 of their toes. And then I will tell you that I thank God that each one of them was a healthy human being that He had gifted to my wife and I, and gave us the responsibility to nurture that child. I now have the experience of doing the exact same thing with a granddaughter, to look into her face and see this precious individual and look at my son and my daughter-in-law and know that this child is dependent upon them for safety, for food, for protection, and know that they're going to do the exact same thing that I have been blessed to be able to do with them. Every life is precious. Not perfect. Every life is precious. And that's what we need to remember today. And we have an obligation to protect each one. Healthy, imperfect, or infirmed. And I pledge to you, God as my judge, that I will do that just as long as I'm able to take in air and breathe. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I would yield back.
Well, I thank the gentleman. Indeed, life is precious. It's a blessing. It's a gift. As a parent, there is nothing like it. And we have lamented these last 49 years and the loss of these innocent lives. And that our country could stand for that and support that and not only just support it, but go out and campaign for it with our tax dollars, with our rhetoric, with our policies around the globe. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the United States of America where you're guaranteed by your Creator and ordained in the Constitution the gift of life, the blessing of life, the first gift, the first blessing. With that, I'd like to recognize great gentleman, great representative from Georgia, Mr. Andrew Clyde.
Thank you, Chairman Perry. Thank you for leading our House Freedom Caucus, and thank you for leading this special order. You know, the Declaration of Independence What an incredible document that was. That was truly the birth certificate, I believe, of our nation. It was the promise, I would call it, and the Constitution was the fulfillment of that promise. And in the Declaration of Independence, it says, and you've heard this mentioned tonight, but I want to echo it, that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. And among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The very first among those unalienable rights is life. Life. And to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. So who is responsible for securing that right of life? Well, that's the government. And they derive their just powers from the consent of the governed. That's us. That's the American people. That's who consents to the government. That right of life is endowed by our Creator, by God. You know, God gives you a right. Who can take it away? I don't think anyone can take it away. But our Declaration recognizes that some people will try. And so our government is supposed to protect that right. And I'm so thankful that our Supreme Court, which is one of our co-equal branches of government, that they actually stood up after 49 years to defend that right to life. And so I want to echo my friend Congressman Jody Hice from the great state of Georgia, from Georgia's 10th district, just a little bit below mine. I want to echo his sentiments in thanking the justices that stood for life. Justice Samuel Alito, who actually had to be moved from his residence because of the threats. Justice Clarence Thomas, Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett. You know, I think we as a nation should be telling these justices, thank you, and thank you. How many millions more lives will be saved because of this decision that, though it's not final, we believe will be final, will come out in a month. We need to encourage them for standing up and defending life. I think that's so very important because what we have seen so far has been absolutely despicable when it comes from the radical left and their threats to the Supreme Court. You know, there's a reason that the Supreme Court justices are confirmed for a life on the bench, and that's so they're not intimidated. But here we have someone in the Supreme Court that leaked a draft decision with what I believe was the intent to intimidate. So maybe one of those justices would change their mind. Well, I am praying that they don't, and from what we see, they will not, and thank God for that. With that, I yield back to the chairman of our Freedom Caucus.
Well, I thank the good gentleman. I thank all my colleagues. Our time is almost over, but I just want to reiterate that we, these members here and many others on this side of the aisle in particular, stand for life. We stand for the Constitution, which guarantees that life. We stand for the rights enumerated in the Constitution that are given to us by God, granted to us by God, and as my friend said, can't be taken away. Even though some will try, when God gives them to you, they can't be taken away. That is all by design. And we stand for the rule of law enshrined in the Constitution, that folks that would wish to subvert the rule of law, try and color the court's decision, they should be held accountable. Where all men are created equal under the law. But apparently, under this administration, some are more equal than others. Ladies and gentlemen, that is, Madam Speaker, that is the recipe for anarchy. We thank this opportunity to speak to our bosses, our employers, the ones who rule over us, the good Lord and our constituents. This evening, Madam Speaker, we thank you for the time to speak on this very important issue. Stand for the Constitution, stand for the law, and importantly, stand for life. And with that, Madam Speaker, I yield the balance.
The gentleman yields back. The chair lays before the House communications.